Maurice O'Shea, who's probably the grandfather of Australian winemaking, studied at Montpellier University, came back to Australia and selected the Mount Pleasant site, took cuttings from the Old Hill and planted the Old Paddock vineyard, and planted the oldest Pinot Noir vineyard in Australia in 1921. So 2 vineyards that celebrated 100 years last year. But he was making table wines back when everyone else was making fortified wines, and really at the forefront of, Australian winemaking. For any cricket fans out there, the Don Bradman of the wine industry. And the biggest award you can win in Australia right now is called the Maurice O'Shea Award. And it's named after him, and it's for pioneers, people who have led the industry, people who have made a change for the better of the industry. And he had all these great sites, the Old Hill, he planted the Old Paddock, and then went on to pursue and purchase vineyards like Lovedale, which is planted to Semillon, and then the Rose Hill Vineyard, all planted to Reds, which is a great Shiraz site. But I'll let Nicholas talk about the vines there. But it's one of Australia's great houses, I suppose. And I think it's now, owned by McWilliams Wines for a long time, went through administration under new ownership now, and really getting back out there and, joining forces, wanting to collaborate, wanting to tell our history, tell our story. And one of the reasons Nicholas is so keen to join the Old Vine Conference was to tell our story and talk about our vines. So, I'll let him rip into it.
Cool. No, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, so look, and it was sort of touched upon previously, but, Australia is one of those lucky countries to have some of the oldest vine material on the planet. And a lot of it was due to the fact that the bulk of the country escaped phylloxera. Victoria got hit, but South Australia's got some seriously old vines. And the Hunter itself has, as Australia's oldest continuously producing wine region, has some really old vines as well. I think the South Australians have done a really, really good job at getting together, whether it's in McLaren Vale or Barossa Valley, and actually telling their story, putting together registers, putting together, lists. So they have that knowledge of what they have in terms of vine material, how old it is, what varieties they've got. The Hunter doesn't necessarily have that, or nothing at least formalised. So when I started with Mount Pleasant, Adrian was the one that showed me a conference invite to one of the sort of the first Old Vine Conference meetings. And I thought, look, with what we've got on the property, we should be getting involved in this and championing this cause. And so we've done that. And then we've had also other well-known wineries like Tyrrell's. We've been talking to Chris Tyrrell. He's obviously very keen to join as well and be interested in getting involved. And so between the two of us, we've got some of the oldest plantings in the Hunter. And as the slide, which I think you might be able to see now, but 70 hectares all up at the moment, split across 4 individual sites. And of that 70 hectares, 28.6, so a good chunk is planted of vines that are 50 years or older. So where the winery is based, the main 2 vineyards there are the Old Hill and the Old Paddock. So the Old Hill is 3.2 hectares. It's up on this ridge. And like Adrian said, 1880 plantings by the King family, who were the original owners of the property. It's an unknown clone, and it's on own roots. And cuttings from that block have been taken and spread into other blocks on our property, as well as have actually made their way to other properties. So another well-known Australian winery in the Hunts at Broken Wood, their Graveyard Shiraz, which is a high-selling, very collectible Shiraz wine, it's cuttings from the Old Hill. And it's gone everywhere. It's amazing genetic material, and a block that we will delve into. I hope to delve into over the next few years and work out. Maybe we can tell the clone, and I'll lead into this clonal thing conversation, because there's a lot of that happening here at the moment too. So, so the Old Hill is amazing, and our oldest block, 1880, famous Australian Shiraz block, and the fruit, fantastic vines. Even now, we're in spring now, and they look beautiful. They look lush, and the fruit from them, they're prized. That's prized fruit, prize Shiraz fruit, and it tends to go into our top wine in our range, which is the Maurice O'Shea Shiraz. So the Maurice O'Shea, which is our icon flagship wine, is a collection of all the best plots of Shiraz across the 4 properties, all may end up making that wine. And then there's also a single site wine made from that as well. if you want to go back, I don't know if that's possible, back to the old hill just quickly. Yeah, thanks. So Contour Shiraz as well is another planting, 63, own rooted, unknown clone Shiraz. And then the Pinot, and the Pinot's been the really interesting one because the Hunter Valley is not classically known as a Pinot Noir growing region. It's very warm, very humid, summer dominant rainfall. So thin skin varieties can be tricky in those environments, but the actual vineyard that we have, the Pinot Noir vineyard that we have at in the Old Hill section of the vineyard near the winery, is Australia's oldest Pinot Noir vineyard. And it's we've known this, and the company's talked about this for a while, but we're really starting to realise that this block's very significant in the Australian wine industry. There are other vines scattered around Australia that are older, potentially Pinot vines, individual vines, but as a block, as a vineyard, it's 0.6 hectares. It's a reasonable sized block, and it's considered Australia's oldest. It's also what we know as being the birthplace of the MV6 clone. So there's research underway at the moment with the Australian Wine Research Institute in Adelaide, where actually in the next couple of weeks, I'll be taking fresh young leaf material off these new shoots and sending that away to the Institute, and then they will go through, crush that and sequence the genome. And so it's been a project that's been focused in South Australia, looking at what they have as clonal material. But I did a short stint, Adrian's going to laugh, with Henschke back in the day. It was an old, they have old vineyards in South Australia in the Barossa, and Prue Henschke got me onto this project and said that, you know, the Mount Pleasant vineyard, the Pinot vineyard, is known to be Australia's oldest. Be interesting to find out what clones we have. If we do have the MV6 clone, and it can be isolated from that block, essentially the Victorian and the Tasmanian Pinot Noir industries are based off that clone. It's a huge clone, very significant clone in Australia, the MV6 clone. So amazing that we could be sitting, you know, not only in the oldest, but the progenitor of the Pinot Noir industry in the Hunter. It's a bit of a strange one, but
the value of knowing that connection is incredibly high, isn't it? Of just having that kind of genetic resource and link. And I think that's one of the values of old vines. It's their genetic value that you feel is also really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. You know, whether it be the Old Hill Shiraz, like I said, you know, that's the next topic. That's the next research project, really, is to work at what we've got there. But this Pinot one is just, it's rolling, and people are really interested and quite excited to find out what we have as diversity. So it's amazing. So again, it's an interesting planting in the fact that 1921, it's planted on rootstock. So rootstock was a big thing in the 60s and the 70s in Australia, where nurseries were starting to propagate a lot of the vine material. But the fact that it's 1920s and it's on rootstock would go back to Maurice's time in France in Montpellier, and he would have seen, I guess, the impact of post-phylloxera years in Europe, and probably come back to Australia and thought we need to be looking into planting on rootstock because of the potential devastation somewhere down the line. So the 21 plantings are, a lot of the ones that he planted are on Ramsay or Labrusca, Vitis Labrusca. The next slide, if possible.
We can't actually see your slides.
Oh, no, you can't. Oh, okay.
I can.
Can you see it? Maybe virtual.
I can see him, so it's good.
I've got some kind of Horcrux situation going on where I'm trying to multiple dimensions.
Oh, that's okay. Maybe it's just for the virtual tuner inners, but that's okay. So the other big block, so again, at the winery, you've got Old Hill, which is about 17 hectares, or 16 hectares, and the Old Paddock 17 hectares, so it's the same property. The main significant block there is the Old Paddock, which is 0.8 of a hectare, planted in 1921, again on rootstock, this time on Labrusca. And the fruit, again, prize fruit, goes to our top wines and also has a significant site wine made just purely from that fruit. And I believe that wine is there today for tasting, the Old Paddock single site Shiraz. The other vineyard, the two other vineyards that we've got are the Rose Hill vineyard. So the Rose Hill vineyard was planted starting in 1946. So there's the Creek Block Shiraz, which is 5.4 hectares. Again, unknown clone, unknown rootstock. And that tends to go to Maurice O'Shea as well, so our top wine. And then there's a series of blocks planted in the 1960s, so 65, 67, and 68. And again, really prized fruit. Most of those blocks will make the top wines as well. So that's a separate site in another part of the Hunter Valley itself. And then the final vineyard of note is the Lovedale vineyard. So that's our white vineyard as such, and that's on a silt soil. Semillon is the main variety that we have there, and again, probably one of the most famous varieties for the Hunter Valley. And that's 7.5 hectares of 1946 planted Semillon. So that's on rootstock as well. That's on Ramsay rootstock. Not only for phylloxera resistance, but we believe obviously for nematode and salinity tolerance as well, because that site can get a little salty. And again, amazing fruit. The single site Lovedale Semillon's made from that fruit, and that's a $90 Australian $90 price bottle. But yeah, look, that's sort of an overview of the vineyards itself. So ranging from 1880 through to 68, if you want to have 50-year-old vines, and then obviously the rest of the property is either cuttings from some of these old vines or some new varieties that we've planted.
Fantastic. Thank you. So Nick and Adrian, thank you so much for your support for the conference. I know when we first spoke about this conference, you weren't sure whether you were kind of ready to come and speak, but then I'm really glad you did. And I'm looking forward to the next edition. You can come and tell us more and update us on the genetic research that's going into the Pinot Noir clones. And for those of you here in London, you can actually come and taste some of these wines here today. Thank you so much. It's a quick session from the guys at Mount Pleasant, but it's been really a good session. And you know, thank you for your ongoing support. And yeah, have a good evening. And enjoy that wine.
I'm sure there's some hard-hitting questions out there.
Are there some hard-hitting questions?
No.
You don't have any hard-hitting questions. It's so thorough.
Oh, good. Well, thanks very much for including us in this. It's been, yeah, look, I think both Nicholas and I have learned a lot over the last 3 months being part of this and met some wonderful people. But, you know, again, next year, if we hope to get to London and talk to you all and meet you all in person and really bring some findings about, you know, how we're treating the vineyards, you know, what's next. How do we future-proof these vineyards, making sure that, you know, we're doing everything right? So these 142-year-old vineyards are around for another 142 years. I think, you know, that's the key. Yes.
And I think that's a really amazing vision. And also I look forward to hearing what's happening with the Hunter Valley chapter of the Old Vine Conference. I know that you're talking with other producers and coming together, and I think that would be really exciting. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
No worries. Thanks, Sarah. Cheers.